The golden nuggets, I always say to this to my kids too. When you go out the door in the morning, represent yourself and keep moving. And I think when you're in the property business and you're going to have setbacks, things are going to be up and down for you along the way. You'll win more than you lose if you stay at it and you just keep moving. Sometimes transactions don't work. It's okay. Pick yourself up and move on to the next one.
A great book can totally challenge your conventional thinking and change your life for good. However, some of us just don't have the luxury of time of sitting down to read a book. But there are some instances in which we do have that time, and these are perfect times to learn. So we can learn while driving instead of jamming to the same music on the radio, or maybe at the gym. Well, now you can. Dwellynn has partnered with Amazon's Audible to give you, the Dwell listeners, a free book. Yes, a free book. So all you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/Dwellynn and download your free book. This will also be in the show notes. You can click on the link. And if you don't have a book in mind and you say, Ola, I don't actually know where to start with. Well, awesome, because I can tell you one to start with today. It's a quintessential classic. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So download Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that would basically just take your mind on a different spin. Of course, I'm always open to hear from our Dwell listeners. So email me at ola@dwellynn.com, and then feel free to also give us a rating and review. This really helps us to rank better in iTunes. I can't wait to hear from you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, John, for joining us here at the Dwellynn Show. I really, really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us here today.
Oh, glad to be here. Thank you.
So, John, we've been speaking quite a bit before the show, yeah. So I'm just going to let us jump right into the show. But I typically like my guests to, tell us a little bit more about themselves and kind of what they've been up to lately.
Oh, yeah, right on. So it's funny because a lot of your audience would be able to identify in one way or another with me. I started in my 20s in the real estate investment space. I was I went to college for finance. I came out. I worked down in New York City, and then I went into property. And when I was in my 20s, one of the things that really drove me was I always wanted to sign my own paycheck. I was just fascinated in my 20s with the idea of not being paid by somebody else, but paying myself what I'm worth. And careful what you wish for, because you get out there and it can be a heck of a start.
Oh yeah.
My first transaction, Ola, was for $30,000. And I got the money from, I had some saved and I got some from family, and I went out and bought a building lot. And I, from there, walked into a commercial bank, and it was a wonderful lot. And I had a guy with me who had construction experience. I said, we want to build a house on this lot and we want to sell it. And here's all the numbers. And I had a nice big write-up and a nice workup. And the banker took it in, and I waited. And it's, typical of what you do in a bank process, right? You write a nice little executive summary, you put stuff in. And I hadn't done this before. And I waited. And about maybe a week or so later, banker comes back and he says, look, you have, it's a community bank now. And he says, you have no experience, you have no credentials, but you know what? We like your plan, how you presented it, how you gave us what we wanted. We're going to give you a small line to get started. Why don't you put up a house and see what happens?
Wow.
And we did. And we did really well. And then we took the money from that and we went out and bought 2 lots. And it was, rinse, repeat. And we did it again. And it's just from there, it started to where we were now getting to the point where we were about to, exceed our bank line. And, unfortunately, this stuff was back when, I was your age, which is in the 90s. So, you could walk into a commercial bank back then and do more business like this. But, what you realize in the process is to level up in businesses like real estate investing, or, if you're somebody out there who's buying the single families and you want to get into apartment buildings like what you do and what I do in the development space, you realize, hey, to get there, I need capital. And what we mean by capital is really a commercial bank in earnest, because you're going to go out there and fill the private equity side, which is a skill set onto its own. But you really need that great place where you can get fair interest rates and terms on a reliable basis. And the process is not as difficult as it gets made to sound. I mean, once you've done it, if you start to understand how to better navigate it, like anything, if you understand how it works, then you understand how you fit in. But what always frustrated me when I started all the way up to, even now and a few years ago, was the unpredictability of the commercial bank process. It always seemed like the banking process was, kept a mystery. I mean, sure, we can all learn about ratios and formulas and the like, but you never really knew what they would do with the transaction and if the bank would do it the way you needed it. And as you level up and get into bigger space, you really can't afford to be out due diligence time, money, deposits, and, only to find that your regular banker can't do your deal or that you need to put more money in to make it work. And if you've done this long enough, and there's anybody out there who has, you understand the absolute pain that I'm talking about. So how do we solve this? Well, me, like anybody else, didn't know until it was post the last recession. And what's interesting is I'll give your guests on the call here some glimmer of hope in the process. I have survived 3 recessions, Ola.
That's a lot of recessions. That's a lot.
And in each one, my balance sheet has gone up during the recession. There are ways to do it. Now, listen, I don't want to come back on your podcast in X number of months or a year and have you start to ask me, all right, John, help us. How do we get through a recession? we don't want, you don't want that. Right. But there are ways to do it for sure. And, it's part of the fun process. But so
John, this is like a huge question, right? So, I mean, just like some of our listeners to our Dwellisteners is, I'm a small real estate investor, right? And I'm looking to scale up, right? How can I get capital, right? How can I pierce through the murky waters of commercial, financing and what the bank wants and what they don't want, the debt ratio they're looking for, and the collateral that they want? It's so many different terms that making that transition from being sort of like a, maybe you're flipping and you want to go into apartment business, it's just so much. How can they pierce through that curtain?
The commercial bank business, part of the process when you start talking about commercial banking and you get into the property side and you just hit on it, it's really it's better when you talk about commercial credit lines for your business. If you're a bakery and you want a credit line, it's very different than if you're a real estate investor looking for collateralized loans against assets. The collateralized loan part is a lot easier space to be in. And bankers will always start the process looking at 3 things on your property. They always are interested in your net operating income. So whether you have a single family home that you want to say, hey, look, I want to buy, renovate, and hold, and then flip, and I need a bank loan to be able to sit there and hold it, they're going to look at your NOI just like they are in any of the apartment buildings that we talk about, or a commercial plaza. It's net operating income. The next thing that they're going to want is they're going to take that net operating income and they're going to apply a capitalized value or rate to it, or they're going to get an appraiser and they're going to value the property. And they're only going to lend you a percentage of the value of the asset. So they'll give you 75, 80% of the property, depending, in most cases, in a general discussion. And the third thing they look at is what's called the debt service coverage ratio. And what that shows the banker is your capabilities from your cash flow to cover your mortgage principal and interest payments. It's those 3 things, Ola. So once you get a grip on what those 3 things are, then you're able to immediately start the conversation with the commercial bank. So the first step in the process is understanding that. And the second step is understanding what I just said is you're in business. And so many times if you're out there and you're somebody who works somewhere else and you have a job, you work in an insurance company and you say, I'm just an investor, I want to go out and buy houses. Tougher to convince the commercial bank that you're engaged in a process. And if you think about it, why would they lend to you in that space that way, like they would somebody like yourself? So part of it is presenting yourself as, hey, no, I'm in this business. I'm an investor in this space. And, I've hit the threshold of 10 units for Fannie Mae. and I want to be able to go higher and buy more. Here's what I've done. And you start to show the banker, where you're at and what you've done. And your debt service coverage ratios work, you can immediately start the conversation with the commercial bank. So how do we start the conversation, right? And this is where I get so excited about the transition from where I'm in development, and now I'm also into the software development. And let me tell you that fun of that story. So I'm out with a fairly decent sized transaction, trying to get it refinanced out of a commercial bank that was being taken over by another a few years back. And I end up networking to a resolution to find a lender who would do my transaction. And it ends up being my partner, Dan Crowley, who is in commercial loan success. But at the time, I didn't know that. So Dan is one of the most heartfelt entrepreneurs that you'll ever meet. And he just a fantastic guy. And he agrees to meet me. And he's sitting there with a laptop. And I'm giving him the pro forma on my transaction that he has asked for. And he's tapping away. And he says, okay. And I'm trying to get this loan done. And he says, okay, you're a go. And I said, what do you mean I'm a go? And he goes, I've put your numbers, your income and expense numbers, through my software. My software vets the transaction based on commercial bank guidelines and tells me if you're likely lendable on your transaction from a commercial bank, if you're a stop or a go. Now think about that for a minute. Right? There you sit, Ola. You have apartment property you're trying to finance, or you're trying to consolidate your 5 single-family homes you have together into a nice low percent fair amortization table loan with a commercial bank. And somebody's telling you before you even speak to a banker, oh, you're lendable. You're good. And I'm looking at him going, what do you mean your software? And he goes, yeah, I've written this code. I've used this in my consultancy to place and vet billions of dollars of commercial real estate and business credit lines for people over the last 25 years.
Oh, wow.
And I'm looking at him, and now it's like, right, like, oh, wow. It's changing for me as real estate developer who needs loan, right? It's changing into, wow, do you realize the angst you just relieved from me? Because what was I going to do? I was going to pick up the phone and start calling more bankers. Or I'm going to just walk into a bank cold. And what am I going to do? I'm going to say, here's my executive summary. Here's my numbers, all the stuff we all do today to try to get, a relationship built or get a property funded through a commercial bank. So I'm looking at him and I'm like, well, I need this for my computer. What's the output of it? And he goes, oh, it's one sheet of paper that gets output, and I take that one sheet and I've written it in code in banker language. It's designed for the banker to consume the metrics on the transaction in 1 minute or less and be able to tell me if you're a stop or a go. So what I'll do is I'll take this, I'll send it out to a few of the bankers I work with, and they'll give me an answer in a day or so, and you'll get an LOI.
Very fascinating.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Right? So I've done a few flips myself, and the typical thing we do as real estate investors is you go to a hard money lender, right? And obviously those usually come with a somewhat high interest rate compared to what you probably could get from a commercial bank, and obviously with points. So are you saying this approach can actually help us avoid going through that route, or do you still face some of stopping blocks, like you don't have enough experience or you don't have enough rental or flips in your portfolio for us to give you a loan, so you have to go to a hard money lender? Can this tool help us?
Well, yeah. So let's look at what happens now with what we have. We're in an era. It's funny, you and I were talking in the beginning, me in my 50s, and when I started, you always want to use the modern day tools that are available to help you in business. And back when I started, my cell phone was mounted in my little 4-wheel drive. That's how long ago it was. And boy, when we finally got it in our hands, it's like, and texting was something that came across the pager on your belt. I mean, it wasn't this, so you sit here today and say, well, what tools can I use to change the conversation? So what we just talked about was what is now Commercial Loan Success, which is our software, which we have for apartment property, mixed use, commercial, for business credit lines, and it can all be adapted to be used by anybody who has more than one property, be it single family or multi. So what it does is it gives me an output that is on one piece of paper to begin the conversation with a banker in a whole different way. I'll give you a perfect example of how this is working. A young guy in his 20s is out there. He buys our software, and the software is designed to be affordable for everybody. It's not designed to be thousands of dollars where you have to buy it as an investor. You can get it for $100 to $200, per screener, depending upon what you want to do. And so now you've got information for yourself. And he prints out his one sheet, which was a Go validated condition from the numbers he put in. And he walks into a commercial bank. And he does exactly what we tell him in our resource center to say. He walks in and he says to the banker, I have this transaction I want to do. I've vetted it with software that shows me, that takes my numbers against commercial bank guidelines and tells me that I'm a go. Would you like to continue the conversation with me on this transaction? And he puts this down in front of the person who's in the branch. And he's happened to walk into one of those branches where some of the corporate offices are upstairs and there's a commercial lending team on site. And the vice president looks at what he hands him. He says, and where'd you get this? He goes, I bought this online. And the guy's reading it and he goes, I'm sorry, can you just excuse me for a minute? I'll be right back. And the banker goes upstairs and he comes back down. Well, he brings back down the senior vice president of lending. Now, this guy's in his 20s. This is, one of his first deals he's done. And he's sitting there, and the senior vice president goes, this is fantastic. You're like a very prepared borrower. We will be happy to continue the conversation with you. And so he's sitting there, and he's telling us the story. And it's like, now I'm feeling pretty good here. I think I'll start negotiating rate. And I'm like, no. Just hang out. You're good. You've got a senior vice president of a bank who you have impressed. And that's where it starts. It's still a human business. Bankers are humans. They really don't want to deny you for the loan. Yet around the country, the statistics are horrifying. They're out there rejecting over half of the transactions that come into them. But when you talk to the bankers say, the problem is we've got borrowers that come in with either unrealistic expectations, or we've got borrowers that come in unprepared. And what this software does is it prepares the borrower to connect with us in our language. And they really like that. So if we change the conversation out there using modern day tools, like I did when all of us did when we first got our cell phone, right? If you change the conversation to speed up business to where now everything you're doing, Ola, and I don't even know this, but I can guess with certainty, right? That if you're going to try to fund an apartment building, you're doing an executive summary, you're putting in nice pictures, you're putting in a nice write-up from you about where the property's at, and then you're putting in your numbers, your income, expenses, and you're coming down to a net operating income, and you're giving a package to the banker. And if you and I did that today, we're going to do what we always do. We're going to do what? We're going to wait. And right. When are we going to get an answer from them on what we handed them?
Who knows?
Right. Maybe next week. Right. So instead, let's now digitally connect, or let's download, print, and share a one-sheet document and say, do you want to continue the conversation with me? Now, the banker is still in business, and they're there to make money and profit just like everybody else. So they look at this one sheet and they see your metrics work, and they see that you were astute enough to present to them the three pieces of information they really want to see right away. Now, they look at it, they start to vest. They start to get involved in the transaction, especially if they're at the community level. These people are community builders. They're there to do business. Now they say, gee, I can make this loan. These numbers work. Let me find out about Ola. Now, you said it before. Are there issues that are in somebody's file that can prevent the bank from being comfortable doing business? Of course. You still have to have arranged enough down payment to do any deal that you're trying to do. Now, you can get that yourself, or you can raise that from private capital sources. You still have to be able to demonstrate to the bank some level of competency that you can actually do what you're saying you're going to do. I mean, as a real estate developer, have taken millions of dollars from banks and repaid it. If I went in there today and said, hey, you know what? I think I'd like to start my own dentist practice. Why would they lend to me? So you're still in a situation. So if you've never done a transaction before, or you've only done one, like you said, my portfolio's thin. Well, wait a minute. What if you went in and, you said, okay, banker says, well, how are you going to manage this property, Ola? And you said, I have property management hired. What's wrong with that? That's a person, that's right out of the Think and Grow Rich book. That's surround yourself with people who are professionals at things you're not. Bankers are okay with that because you're now running what? A business. You're not just somebody sitting there going, hey, you know what? I saw on TV some people who were buying and flipping houses, and this looks really cool. I just want to go do this. You have to say, no, I'm in business. I'm about profit. I'm here to turn a profit. My first one, or this is my first one, but here's how I'm going to do it. But do you like my numbers? Banker says, I like your numbers. All right. So what do I need? Banker will tell you. Banker will say, well, you need more experience, or you need a property manager, or you need, because they're now vested in the transaction. If I walk in the front end and throw my portfolio book on the desk and I just say, hey, I want to borrow against this house, I can tell you already how that's going to go. So let's change the conversation for all of us, because I know this. I've learned enough about it by talking to entrepreneurs across the country with our software. No matter what level you're at, me and you, all the way down to the guy who's listening today, or gal who's starting, right? The commercial bank or community banking process is somewhere, the feeling about starting it up this morning is somewhere between nervous and complete dread. Neither one of those is good. Let's empower ourselves. Let's sit on our own computer, DIY. Let's pre-screen our transaction. Let's find out if we're a stop. Why are we a stop? Why does the software say we're not lendable? Oh, we don't have enough income in the deal. Well, that's good. We just saved ourselves, didn't we?
We did.
How many times do you think you got a good deal and you don't? I mean, you sit there with little fantasy softwares and you say, well, all right, let me see. I want a cash on cash return of this. And you're putting in numbers and you're saying, oh, well, I'm going to pay the landscaper this amount of money, or I'm going to pay the snow removal guy this much. And you really don't know what you're paying them because you don't have a bid in front of you. And you're looking at this house and you're guessing where you're going to get, and you want your cash on cash. And you're saying, oh, this is a good deal for me. Let me offer it to the seller. Well, you didn't take 1 minute of consideration, even though you sit and say, well, I'll do an 80% loan to value. If you're in the Fannie Mae handbook, maybe you can feel comfortable enough to think that the lender will give you the money. But if you want serious commercial bank money to grow your business, you can't operate that simplistically. You've got to speak in their language with metrics and use a commercial loan software to be able to go in and say, all right, here's my numbers. I'm organized. Would you like to continue the conversation with me? What do you think they're going to say, Ola?
So if I'm a millennial, right, just like I am, or some of our listeners here, and I'm thinking of really getting started, but in the commercial real estate investing space, with all your years of experience, and you've done almost $50 million in transactions, what is your single best advice to that young person looking to start, but just wants to kind of leapfrog straight into the commercial space?
Sure. So depending upon the type of space you're in, to me, is you decide that you're going to, if you're going to buy, the single families and rent them on a buy and hold, and you're going to try to level up, or you want to get into apartment building space, all of it's doable. Organizing the money side is where you have to start. You have to be able to know, okay, where am I going to get the money to do what I want to do? Using software programs like CLS that tell you that, you can know if you qualify before you apply. I mean, I've had, people bigger size than me in the development space say, who the heck wouldn't want to know that they qualify before they apply? Down at the bank. I mean, who wouldn't want to know? So it's the same thing. If I'm going to buy a single family home, I need to know, okay, if the bank will give me 80%, where am I getting the 20% from? Well, it's a lot easier discussion to go into somebody who's a private lender that you may know from your network or that you've been introduced to. If you have a software program, and people use ours the same way, to say, okay, I'm a good risk according to, this is a good transaction according to bank lendability standards. And if it's a good deal for the bank, it should be a great deal for all of us. So you can show the private lender with software how they fit in. If there's somebody that you're going to pay at the end, if there's somebody you're going to amortize, if you're going to pay interest, within the rents, how are you going to handle the private lender? You put it right into the software, and then you hand the private lender the document the same way. And it's such an easy discussion when you're saying to somebody, hey, I've got a great opportunity because the numbers work, versus, hey, I need to borrow money to buy a house.
Right.
And,
all right.
And so just my advice, use the modern day tools that you have available to eliminate as many issues as you can in the transaction. If you don't have property management skill, Google, find a local property manager, introduce yourself, get a proposal from them. If you don't have the money, understand what that means, vet your transaction, understand it qualifies, and then go out there and network to a resolution, because you're empowered. Your numbers work. Your deal is good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
John. So if I'm a dual listener and I'm like, oh, wow, I really want to know more about CLS. Can you tell us a little bit more about CLS and how can we kind of get started with that software?
Sure. So we've got an ebook coming out that is going to be out within the month of September, and it'll probably help a lot of the listeners that we're addressing here today who are just starting out, and even the pros out there will find some stuff in there that they'll like. It's called Commercial Loan Success, and it's a guide to lender financing your business or investment property. And we give away, for anybody who's willing to sit and listen to me yak, we give away chapter 2 of the book, which is a deep dive into all the things we think you need to do as a business and on a personal level before you speak to a commercial or community banker about lending on your transaction. And it's basically a massive checklist of, do you have your LLC form? Do you have? It's all the things that you need to know before you even start the conversation to enhance your success. And we give that away for people who listen today. That is at web.commercialloansuccess.com/DS for the Dwellynn Show. So it's web.commercialloansuccess.com/DS. And in there's also a link over to a demo for our software where they can get it at a nice discount if they're interested in that. But that book will help with a lot of the questions that you've asked me today. It's actually a journey through the capital raising process from a lender, be it public or private, and it'll help answer a lot of the stuff that we just went through.
Really appreciate that, John, giving away that to our dual listeners. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So we're definitely dwelling into the quick round now. So these are going to be quick questions and quick answers. You ready, sir?
I'm ready.
All right. First question. What makes John Matheson unique? What is that differentiating factor that separates you from the next girl or the next guy?
The golden nuggets, I always say this to my kids too. When you go out the door in the morning, represent yourself and keep moving. And I think when you're in the property business and you're going to have setbacks, things are going to be up and down for you along the way. You'll win more than you lose if you stay at it and you just keep moving. Sometimes transactions don't work. It's okay. Pick yourself up and move on to the next one.
I really like that. Sounds very, very familiar. Next question. What was the last book that you read? And what was the one nugget? What was the one thing that you picked from that book?
There's so many books. And, I will mention again, Think and Grow Rich. I'm an older guy, and it's just something that, that I really liked. One part of it where it said, surround yourself with people who are good at things that you're not. And I think when we're in real estate, building a team is crucial. And it's something I employed starting at your age. And it was just I think it's just very important that you realize, hey, if I'm not good at something, let me build my team. And the team gives you strength in numbers and allows you to move from wherever you're at to the next level in a hurry. So I would take one of the chapters of that book and tell everybody in real estate to read that and realize, hey, surround yourself with people that are better at you with certain elements of what you do, and you'll really find that your business can really take off. So true.
So true. Last question. You've got CLS going, you've got all your, development stuff, you're investing, you've got a ton of stuff going on. What do you do for fun?
Well, I've always felt, along the way, and it's interesting, you look at your business, and I'll give this advice to you with a young family too. Make sure along the way you spend time with your family. When you're in the real estate business and you're in the investment space, it's so tempting to work 24/7. It's so tempting to give up the weekends, to be at nights and miss things that your kids do along the way. And I would say to anybody out there starting out with the young family, don't make the mistake of letting your business where you miss out on things in your family life. So I always take time for my kids and family. And it's really what I do. So it's always something I look forward to is, if it's the weekend or if it's a vacation or something, it's spend the time with the family. You'll feel a lot better about when you finally hit a moniker of success in your business and you look back, you'll feel better. You won't have the feeling that, I missed out. I was working through things like recitals and ball games that my kids had that they wanted me at along the way.
I mean, there's really this myth of being a real estate investor really equates to sitting down all day somewhere on the beach. Well, folks that haven't actually jumped in fully can't even comprehend what you just said, that it can be so tempting to work 24/7 because that's what you do as an entrepreneur. You just want to work. So I really like that you mentioned that, you brought that up, and I try to do the best I can. Spend time with my baby and my wife, and it is really tough. It is really tough. So it's having that discipline to say this is enough work, now it's family time, and really separating those two things as well is very, very challenging. So that's a good one, John. If I'm a Dwell listener and I'm like, I really like this John guy, I want to connect with John, where can people, connect with you? Where can people go out and reach out to you?
Oh, sure. Just all they need to do is go to commercialloansuccess.com, and we're very reachable through there. There's all the typical links that you would expect to find on sites. There's stuff about us in there. There's places to reach us, and it'd be really easy for them to be able to do that. And we wish them all well out there, because it's a tough climate when you get into this stuff, and things will go up and down, but if you stay the course and keep moving, you'll find that you can actually do real well with real estate investing.
That's a good way to close this out. Thank you again, John. Really, really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you.